You wake in silence, not the gentle hush of morning, not the soft quiet of peace, but the kind of silence that feels intentional, too precise, too perfectly placed, like it was arranged by someone who understood how to muffle even the soul. The only sound is the faint hiss of an oil lamp burning in a niche across the room. Its flame flickers against polished stone walls that seem to close in, though they're far too grand to be called tight. The air smells faintly of rose resin, and something sharper, something medicinal. Beneath your fingertips, the linens are impossibly soft. The fabric dyed in a hue you've only ever seen on senators during festival days. Everything is too fine, too clean, too perfectly chosen, and not a single thing seems meant for you. You try to remember how long you've been here. Days, weeks. It's hard to say. There's no sun to count by, only torchlight in the corridors, and the tap of footsteps that never approach your door. Meals arrive at regular intervals, though you've stopped keeping track of them. Fresh bread sweetened with fig. Water so clear it might have been melted from alpine snow. Occasionally wine, always just enough to relax the limbs, never enough to dull the mind. The servants never speak to you. They bow, avert their eyes, set things down, and disappear into the hush. They move like dancers. No wasted steps. No sound beyond the gentle fold of fabric and the soft, deliberate click of sandals on mosaic. When you try to speak, they do not respond. Not out of cruelty, but out of design. You are not supposed to ask questions. You haven't seen the Emperor? Not truly, but you've heard him. Or rather, you've heard his silence. The kind of absence that fills a room even when no one is there. The halls shift when he passes. The guards straighten, the marble seems to gleam more brightly, the air itself tightens. His presence is everywhere, and yet you've never been granted a glimpse. But the servants whisper. They don't know you're listening. Or maybe they do. Maybe it doesn't matter. He stopped walking you over here one morning behind a half-open door. He just stood there and stared. At the boy, another voice asks. Not the boy, the first corrects, softer now. At the eyes. He said they were hers. Exactly hers. The words sit with you for hours. Not because you understand them, but because some part of you, deep and small and unguarded, already does. You press your face to the polished bronze mirror by the dressing table. The room behind you warps slightly in the curve of the metal. You see your own shape reflected almost. The hair is wrong. The robes don't fall quite right. But the eyes, yes, even you see it. There's something not yours in the way they catch the light. That night your bed has been remade in a different arrangement. Pillows piled higher, linens embroidered with small white doves. You don't remember requesting anything new, but you lie there anyway, letting the soft scent of jasmine from the silk sheets lull you into something like rest. Then the dreams come. In them you walk through the palace, not as yourself, but as someone slightly taller, lighter on her feet, slower in breath. The hallways curve behind you. The statues seem to turn their heads as you pass. You wear your own face, and yet you don't. And when you speak, the voice is not yours at all. You wake sweating. The maids arrive at dawn as always, but now they approach differently. One lifts your arm to measure the angle of your wrist as it drapes. Another adjusts the fall of your robe across your chest. A third brushes your hair back and begins to part it in a style you've never worn, something intricate, with tiny braids wound at the temples. Still no one speaks. You sit still, heart-stuttering beneath the surface. This is no ordinary grooming. This is preparation. But for what you find out later that day, when one servant older than the others leans in just slightly and whispers as if remembering something. She used to wear it like this. He always said it brought out the lines in her neck. You blink, but the woman is already gone. Another day passes, then another. The alterations continue. Your slippers are replaced smaller, more delicate. A bracelet is added to your wrist, gold and ivory carved in a style that feels ceremonial. When you ask what it's for, the servant only replies it was hers. Her. Always her. Never named. But more present in these halls than anyone else. And then one evening, as you sit in your room beneath a curtain of candlelight, you begin to understand. The robe, the perfume, the walk, the way the servants tilt your chin upward before they leave. It isn't grooming, it's rehearsal. You are not being dressed, you are being sculpted. They say grief does strange things to men with no limits, but Nero, Emperor of Rome, did not grieve like a man. He grieved like a god who refused to let something mortal slip through his fingers. Here's a truth most history books won't dwell on. After the death of his wife, the emperor ordered her likeness, painted by dozens of court artists. Not just in one pose, but from every angle. Laughing, crying, angry, asleep. He sent guards to collect descriptions from her former attendants. He reconstructed her in mosaic and sculpture, even in scented wax. He tried quite literally to preserve her essence. It wasn't enough. And then one day he saw you. No one says this aloud, but it's understood you weren't chosen because of who you are. You were chosen because of who you remind him of. Historians still debate how it happened. Some say Nero spotted you among palace attendants and whispered she's returned. Others say he ordered a quiet search across the empire for anyone who looked remotely like her. But the how no longer matters. Only the result. Because now you sit where she once sat. You eat what she once ate. You sleep in linen soaked with her scent. And slowly, softly, you are becoming someone else. You begin to avoid mirrors, not out of fear, but because the face that looks back at you is no longer entirely yours. A tilt of the head, the flutter of lashes, the curve of a half smile, none of it feels natural. And yet you do it, because the silence of the palace demands it. Here's a curious detail. According to some ancient texts, Nero refused to dine unless the food was arranged exactly as it had been during her final meal. Even the position of the goblets on the tray had to match. When asked why, he simply replied, "Because she liked it that way." And so everything in this place becomes ritual. Every breath, every sip, every step. And you, once a person with a name, a past, a voice, are no longer acting. You are becoming. You begin to understand that in this palace you are not a guest, not even a captive. You are a reconstruction, a soft echo of a grief that refuses to pass. And that is where our story truly begins. If slow, thoughtful stories like this help you sleep, or if you simply find comfort in quiet journeys through forgotten corners of history, you're always welcome here. No pressure, just calm evenings, warm stories, and time to let the past speak softly. And while you drift off, I'd love to know, what would you have done if your face was no longer your own? If you had to live not as yourself, but as someone else's memory? Leave a comment if you'd like. I read every one of them. Now, breathe slowly. The story is only just warming up. There's no announcement when it happens. No trumpet, no decree. Just a pause longer than usual between the closing of your chamber door and the next breath you take. And in that pause you feel it. A shift in the air. Something changing. The silence is no longer passive. It's watching. The lamps are lit earlier than usual. The robe you're given is even more ornate today, embroidered at the cuffs, with a faint scent of something bitter beneath the perfume. Your hair is combed not by one servant, but 3 each with a different task. One smooths, one braids, one adjusts the fall of your fringe with maddening precision, like they're tracing a map only they can see. When you glance toward the mirror, one of them quietly tilts it away. There's a tension in the room they're trying not to show, but you feel it in the careful movements, the lack of eye contact, the way the younger one fumbles the hairpin but pretends she didn't. Something is coming, Later, they bring in a man you've never seen before. Middle-aged, with a trimmed beard and ink stains on his fingertips. He doesn't speak either. He carries a wooden case which he opens slowly. Inside, Stylus's charcoal papyrus. He lifts his gaze and studies your face not like a person, but like a subject. You hold still. He sketches in silence, nodding occasionally, sometimes frowning. Another man joins him, older, with a roll of parchment, already half filled. They confer in whispers, gesturing to the curve of your cheek, the distance between your eyes, the line of your jaw. At one point, the older man says softly, "It's the bone structure." That's what caught him. He doesn't need to explain who him is. You sit like that for hours. You aren't offered food, not water, not rest, just quiet examination under flickering torchlight. Eventually, they leave, murmuring their conclusions as they go. Something about angles, ratios, a list of things to adjust. You are not a person to them. You are a possibility. A week ago, maybe more, you thought this was a dream, some strange, quiet elevation. You imagined it might pass, that it was grief or madness, or perhaps a mistake. But now you know. The Emperor has seen you, and now he wants more. There's a moment that evening when you find yourself standing by the latticework balcony of your chamber, staring into the distant torch glow of the Roman gardens below. The trees rustle softly in the breeze, their leaves silvered by the moon. You wonder if she, whoever she was, once stood in this exact place. Wonder if she looked out at this same landscape, with the same aching knot in her chest. That strange blend of beauty and unease, of being adored and erased at once. You're not sure when you begin to forget your own voice. But you do. There's no need to speak here after all. No one asks you questions. No one expects an answer. Instead, they observe. They dress. They adjust. And slowly they correct. The first correction is subtle. A tilt of the chin that's too sharp. A smile that's not quite right. Then comes posture. She sat taller. Someone mutters. And walks slower, more poised. Your lessons are not announced. They simply happen. One morning a new figure enters. Not a maid. Not an artist. A woman with pale robes, older than the others, with ink-stained fingers, and an unsettlingly steady voice. She asks you to speak. Just a phrase. One line. You do. She stops you midway. Too flat, she says. Try again. With breath. You try again. Better. But too much breath this time. Draw it back. And so begins the second phase. Voice. Tone. Inflection. You are taught to draw out certain vowels, to pause just a half second longer between words. You're given scripts, not poetry. Not speeches, but conversations. Questions and answers she once gave. Reconstructed from memory, from records, from rumor. Do you remember your first dress? Yes, you reply, as instructed. It was red with gold embroidery. My mother said I looked like a flame. It's not your line, but you say it like it is. Another phrase. Another prompt. Another correction. You practice for hours each day, not because they demand it, but because you sense that refusal is not an option, and because something strange begins to happen. The more you speak her lines, the more you feel yourself slipping. There's a strange comfort in not having to be yourself. No decisions, no doubts, just mimicry, just instruction. If you are her, then you are perfect. Or at least you are perfect in the Emperor's eyes. And isn't that safer? Here's something the histories rarely note. In Nero's later years, he became obsessed with theatricality. He performed on stage, sang before audiences, played the lyre as if Rome itself were a stage set for his endless drama. He didn't just want to rule, he wanted to be watched, to be adored, to control not just the empire's armies, but its attention. Is it any surprise then that he'd want a performance off stage too? A private, endless play in which you are the lead, and you have no script of your own. You think of her more often now, not out of fear, but because you need to know her, or at least who they say she was. The servants begin to tell you small things. One confides that she liked fig cakes in the afternoon. Another whispers that she hummed a tune when nervous something old and almost childlike. Someone else tells you she hated figs, actually, and that the humming was a fabrication part of the myth. You're not sure which is true, and maybe it doesn't matter. Truth here is negotiable. There's a moment, midnight perhaps, when you catch your own reflection again. You weren't looking for it. You just passed the mirror while crossing the room, and for a split second you stop, because the person looking back isn't you. Not entirely. The angle of the head, the arch of the brow, even the softness in the gaze, it's familiar, but not yours. Not quite. And you wonder in that moment if this is how it felt for her too, whoever she was, to be watched, to be mirrored, to be shaped. You press your fingers to the glass just briefly. The bronze is cold, but your breath fogs it, leaving behind a soft mark that quickly fades, just like everything else. They say the Emperor still hasn't summoned you, that he's waiting, watching, preparing, that the artists have submitted sketches, that the instructors have submitted reports, that he has reviewed them all in silence with something like awe. The phrase someone uses carelessly, foolishly, not realizing you can hear is chilling. He thinks he's found a way to bring her back, not replace her. Bring her back. And you are the vessel. That night your meal is smaller, just wine bread and a single fig. The wine is darker than usual, the bread still warm, and the fig sweet, almost too sweet. You eat it in silence. You don't know what tomorrow will bring, but something in your chest tells you that the Emperor has made his decision. You won't be waiting much longer. You are summoned without words. It happens the way everything happens here, quietly, inevitably. A gesture from a servant, a glance held just a bit too long, the shifting of the light through the sheer curtain at the far end of your chamber. It's late afternoon, though time doesn't mean much in this place. You've stopped counting days. What matters now is rhythm, routine, the slow erosion of what you once were. They lead you through a corridor you haven't seen before. The tiles are older here, darker, more worn. The walls are quieter lined, not with mosaics, but tapestries. You catch glimpses of falcon with outstretched wings, a woman raising a lyre, a pair of clasped hands. Scenes from lives that aren't yours. The room you're brought to is small, circular, and dim. The air smells faintly of beeswax and something metallic. Waiting there without ceremony is a physician. He does not greet you. He does not introduce himself. He simply observes. You stand still under his gaze, unsure of what's expected. He walks around you slowly, like someone inspecting a sculpture from all angles. Not rudely, but clinically, the way one might study a statue of Venus for symmetry. Occasionally he mutters to the scribe beside him, who scribbles quickly without looking up. They measure the length of your arms, the curve of your shoulders, the shape of your collarbone. Fingers pressed gently beneath your jaw. You're asked to speak again, short phrases this time, delivered in that studied cadence they've taught you. Each syllable weighed like gold dust. The scribe notes when you stumble. You feel heat rise to your cheeks. Nearly there, the physician murmurs almost to himself. The resemblance is unsettling. You don't ask who you resemble. You already know. It's in the way the servants step aside when you enter a room, the way your reflection no longer surprises them, the way they have stopped reacting to your presence at all. You are not becoming someone else. You are already her. That evening your robe is changed again. This time it's blue, the precise shade of crushed lapis, with embroidery that curls like vines along the sleeves. It fits perfectly, like it had been waiting years for you to grow into it. At dinner, no words are exchanged. The meal is lighter than usual. A slice of soft cheese, a few olives, and one pomegranate seed placed carefully at the center of your plate. You stare at it, just one. It's the kind of gesture that means something. Here's something curious. Roman imperial households kept meticulous records, not only of finances, but of preferences, favorite meals, colors worn on auspicious days, phrases used in private conversation. These details were used to recreate consistency, not out of affection, but control, order, predictability. And now those notes are being applied to you. The next morning you are escorted into the largest chamber yet. It's blinding at first, sunlight pouring through a series of high, narrow windows. The floor is marble inlaid with golden threads that shimmer like running water. At the center of the room, a raised dais flanked by columns. A low platform stands before it, surrounded by cushions. A setting that suggests not judgment, but observation. You are asked to kneel, not by words, by presence. The way the air stills, the way the gods at the far end shift their stance. You understand instinctively, this is not a room for standing. You lower yourself. Time stretches. You don't look up. You don't need to. He's there. You feel it before you hear it, a change in the weight of the space. The air bends slightly as if adjusting to accommodate someone whose expectations have already entered before he does. You hear the soft pad of sandals on marble, the rustle of fabric, and then nothing. A long silence. You keep your eyes lowered, and then a voice. Quiet but unmistakable. Look at me. You do. The man who stands before you is not what you expected. Younger, perhaps, softer in the face. But there's something in his gaze that unsettles. Not cruelty, not even madness. Something more difficult. A hunger that is not for food. A thirst that is not for wine. A longing that has learned to twist itself into power. He studies you. You try to remain still, but every muscle aches with effort. He steps forward, reaches out. His fingers brush your jaw, then tilt your head just slightly, turning it to the light. You flinch almost, but don't move away. You already know what's at stake. She smiled more, he says, almost absently, but not with the mouth. It was always in the eyes. He steps back, and for a moment he smiles. Not at you. Through you. Like he's seen a ghost. Historians still argue whether this meeting truly happened in silence. Some say he gave a formal declaration. Others suggest he wept. But the accounts agree on one point: from that day forward, you were no longer addressed by your own name. You are not yourself anymore. That night the maids whisper with something like reverence. Your chamber is cleaned twice. New sandals are brought softer, thinner, and a ring is placed beside your bed. Simple gold with a single emerald. No note, no explanation. Just the ring. You stare at it for hours, unsure whether to put it on. Unsure what it would mean if you did. The next day brings changes. You are moved to new quarters larger with a private garden. The attendants are more experienced now, older, more practiced. You are no longer corrected. You are watched. They bring you scrolls not to read but to memorize. Memories that are not yours. Phrases she once used. Opinions she once gave. You study them until they blur. Until they begin to feel like something you might have said. The fig cake is back, along with the wine she preferred. Your meals match hers now, day by day. You know this because the servants note your reactions. If you grimace, the dish disappears the next day. If you smile, it returns. It's not affection. It's calibration. Even the garden seems curated. You notice the lavender has been cut back, replaced with white roses. One of the maids tells you again softly that she hated lavender. It gave her headaches. So now you hate it too. You walk through the garden one evening, the air heavy with rosewater and dusk, and realize the life you are living is not yours. It is a reconstruction. A dream someone else refuses to wake from. You begin to forget your own dreams. You no longer remember your childhood clearly. You don't recall what your real voice sounded like before they changed it. When you laugh, it's in a register you didn't know your throat could reach. And yet it sounds natural now. That's the most terrifying part. Here's a little-known tidbit. During the last years of his reign, Nero began writing private plays for a single person, to perform plays never staged, for public eyes never shared with the court. Just private scripts written in his own hand for one role, always the same character. Scholars believe they were written for her. You begin to suspect they were meant for you. And in this role, this endless part, you begin to see your life not as a series of days, but of scenes. You wake, you dress, you rehearse, you appear, you sleep. Each act performed not for love, not for legacy, but for memory. You are no longer being rewritten. You are being preserved. You don't remember when they stopped calling you by your name. It was subtle at first, an omission in the morning, greeting a glance instead of a word. But over time, your identity eroded like wax melting beneath a flame. The staff now refers to you only as her, never directly, never loudly, but always with a certainty that leaves no room for correction. This morning, your garments are waiting before you even wake. You notice the veil, first filmy lavender gray, like the kind placed over statues. Your robe has been changed again, this time to the deepest crimson, and your hair is styled in ringlets that don't suit the shape of your skull. But that's the point, isn't it? The shape doesn't matter. Only the silhouette she once cast. The room where they take you next is not one you've seen before. It's circular and dim with a slight echo that gives every step the sound of an entrance. At the center, a raised stool carved from ivory. You are asked again wordlessly to sit, and then it begins. One by one, attendants approach. First, the bath. Your body is scrubbed with sponges soaked in rosewater and vinegar, not for cleanliness, but scent. The next step is oil carefully applied with slow, sweeping gestures, as if you were a canvas. Then the cosmetics crushed pearl lead-based powders, a tiny jar of red pigment for your cheeks. The sensation is not unpleasant. It's the silence that unnerves you. No one speaks, not even when a small iron tool is passed around to trace the shape of your brows, or when they begin painting your lips in that same deep plum shade. From the portrait hanging in the emperor's private quarters, a mirror is held before you. Polished bronze again, always bronze, never silver, never glass. You wonder if it's because even your reflection must remain historically accurate. For the first time, you truly see what they see. It is not that you look like her. It's that you no longer look like yourself. Somewhere in the folds of memory, you recall her name Sabina. Or perhaps that was only the name she was given when she became empress. Historical records are frustratingly inconsistent. But one fact repeats: she was loved, or feared, or maybe both. And when she was lost, Nero did not bury her. Not truly. According to ancient accounts, Suetonius among them, the emperor refused to follow Roman funerary customs. Instead of cremating her body and releasing her spirit as tradition demanded, he had her embalmed and displayed in a glass sarcophagus, perfumed daily and guarded like a relic. It was said he dined beside her for weeks, whispered to her, toasted her silence. That was how deep the fracture went. And now you are here. Later you're led into another chamber, this one adorned with tapestries of myth. You recognize some of them. Narcissus gazing into the pool, Pygmalion kissing the marble statue he sculpted into life. Scenes of transformation, of longing made manifest. Someone clearly chose these on purpose. You are given a scroll, not to read aloud, but to memorize. It is a speech, a dedication, lines written in someone else's hand, words meant for another voice. You read it again and again, trying to find rhythm in its strange syntax. It's not clear whether this is meant to be performed or whether it is itself a ritual. You begin to suspect it doesn't matter. One of the attendants, an older woman with kind eyes, speaks to you softly as she adjusts your cloak. Tomorrow, she says, the emperor will host the ceremony. You want to ask what kind of ceremony, but you don't. You already know. Historians today still debate the nature of the event that followed. Some call it a wedding. Others insist it was a rite of mourning disguised as pageantry. What is agreed upon is that Nero hosted a public affair, lavish, theatrical, and disturbingly precise, at which you were presented not as a consort, but as a continuation. You were not married to the emperor. You were married to a memory. Preparations continue well into the night. A musician is brought in to teach you the lyre. Not chords, just posture. You're posed and reposed until your silhouette matches the one in the fresco above the imperial bath. Then comes dance, 4 steps, a pause, then a turn. You are told it was her favorite. You are told to smile, but only with your eyes. This is not rehearsal. This is reincarnation. A final fitting follows. The veil is heavier now, embroidered with pearls along the edge, designed to fall just above your brow. You are told to walk. Slower, slower. Now again they say, with dignity. One more test, remains the voice. It's the physician again this time, with an actor at his side. The actor speaks in a lilting musical tone, just a few phrases, but you're told to repeat them exactly. You falter. You're corrected. You try again. This time better. There, the physician says, almost to himself, it's in the breath. She was always breathy. The actor leaves without a word. The physician makes one last note on his wax tablet and nods. It's time. That evening you are left alone longer than usual. No food, no attendance. Just a basin of water, a folded cloth, and the emerald ring. You sit on the edge of the bed and hold the ring in your palm. It fits, of course, as if it always had. Outside you hear music beginning, the low pulse of drums, the soft shimmer of flutes. The ceremony awaits. The last thing you do before leaving the room is pause at the mirror, not to check your hair or your veil, but to whisper one last question to your reflection. Am I still here? And your reflection, as always, gives no answer. You never asked to wear purple, and yet that's what they drape over your shoulders, fabric so fine it catches the sunlight and traps it like a pool of melted amethyst. It isn't just the color that weighs heavy on your skin. It's the expectation, the precision, the way they lift your arms wordlessly and adjust the folds so they drape just right, just like hers. Because none of this was made for you. Not really. You're not being dressed. You're being recreated. The attendants no longer flinch when you pause mid-step or resist a command. They simply wait unblinking until you comply. Not because they enjoy control, but because they no longer see you as someone with control to begin with. The robe, the shoes, even the slight scent of frankincense laced in the oil rubbed behind your ears, it all once belonged to someone else. Someone whose ghost lingers in every corner of this estate. You're merely the shell. They train your walk, your gestures, your voice. There's no grand hall filled with applause just yet, but it's coming. You feel it. And before it does, they must make you perfect. You learn how to bow, not like a servant, but like a member of the court. You learn how to lower your eyes, not from fear, but from practiced grace. The tilt of the chin, the curve of the fingers, even how you breathe, all of it, is measured, mirrored, molded. Each day you're handed garments in increasing finery, and each time they are less a gift and more a challenge. One day the tunic is stitched in Greek patterns. The next the sandals are adorned with pearls. Eventually they place a necklace around your neck, cool and impossibly delicate, and murmur quietly that this too belonged to her. No name, of course. They never speak her name aloud, and you're beginning to understand why. To name her would make her real, and to make her real again would mean you must cease to be. Historians still argue whether the transformation was a slow evolution or a sudden, brutal imposition. Some accounts suggest Nero gave orders directly, while others point to an inner circle of advisors, eunuchs and chamberlains who orchestrated the entire affair with whispered instructions and silent glances. What's clear is that the process was precise, deliberate, down to the stitch. You're not being clothed, you're being carved. There is a tailor assigned to you, an older man with hands that tremble only slightly when he fastens a brooch too close to your throat. His silence is not cold, but it is careful. You imagine he's been through this before in some form or another. Perhaps he once served Livia or Poppaea herself. Perhaps he too remembers what the real eyes looked like, the original voice. But he says nothing, not even when you catch his gaze in the mirror, and both of you realize you're not looking at a person anymore, you're looking at a result. And oh, how Rome loved results. This wasn't just fashion. In Nero's Rome, clothing was a language, a form of propaganda. Purple Tyrian purple was a dye made from the secretions of thousands of crushed sea snails, so rare and costly that only the emperor and his closest kin could wear it legally. To be seen in it was to speak loudly without saying a word. I matter. I belong. I am part of this sacred lineage. Now you wear it daily. And still it doesn't feel like yours. Even the mirror betrays you. They've changed your haircut. It's shorter now, styled close to what Nero once admired, what he once mourned. The stylist smooth oils through your hair, parting it, just so matching sketches you've never seen, but which someone clearly remembers. You are in essence being archived in real time. One servant, perhaps more bold than the rest, places a carved comb in your hand and tells you softly to keep it. It once belonged to her. You're not sure whether to thank them or to be afraid. Some mornings you try to rebel in your own quiet way. You hold your shoulders differently. You walk a little faster. But soon you feel the correction, an unspoken tightening of posture from those around you. They do not touch you. They do not scold. But the change is unmistakable. You are nudged ever so gently back into your silhouette. Even your scent is altered. They burn a resin you've never known before, labdanum maybe, or myrrh, and then rub it into your wrists until the memory of your own skin is overwritten. You smell like someone who died a long time ago. And still they ask for more. One evening a harpist arrives, not to entertain you but to test you. She plays 3 notes, then pauses. You're expected to react, not with awe but with familiarity, because this was her favorite piece, and you are her now. At least you're meant to be. The history books don't always say how long this phase lasted. A week, a month, a season. But it hardly matters. Time is different in the palace. It flows not according to hours, but according to transformations. Each day you lose something. Your name, your gait, your preferences. All traded for the perfect reconstruction of someone lost. And here comes the cruelest part. You begin to want it to work. Not out of vanity. Not out of fear, but because you sense that survival lies in becoming convincing, that Nero does not want a close approximation, he wants a resurrection. And to fail in that, well, the consequences are not written down, but they are deeply, chillingly understood. Here's a tidbit the records often forget to mention. Roman noblewomen were sometimes buried with mirrors. Not because they were vain, but because the mirror captured their essence. Now you feel as though you've become one of those mirrors, reflecting, mimicking, never truly seen. The more you submit, the more rewards come. Better food, softer linens, a room with a garden view, but it's all conditional. The moment you slip even a raised brow in the wrong moment, it is noticed. Not punished directly, but registered. Logged. The assistants no longer look surprised when you slip into character first thing in the morning. It's become habit, a reflex. You smile as she might have. You nod as she likely did. And you're learning things about her in the strangest ways. The kinds of oils she liked in her bath. The way she placed her sandals when undressing. Even her fear of thunderstorms hinted at when the shutters are drawn tightly on stormy nights, even though you don't mind the rain. Her absence has a shape, and you're being folded into it layer by layer. Once you catch your reflection in the bronze mirror, and for a fleeting second, you believe it. You believe you are her. Or worse, you hope someone else does. Because the tragedy of it all is not just in what you lose, it's in what you start to need. A historian once noted that Nero was not interested in beauty alone. He was obsessed with repetition, with theater, with the idea that a performance done perfectly could undo death. In you, he found his encore, and the performance must continue at any cost. There is no warning, no herald, no trumpet, no sudden flurry of robes or commands to prepare. Just the soft creak of a door you've never seen open before, one hidden so cleverly behind a hanging tapestry that you never once thought to question it. It swings inward slow as a breath, and before you can even rise from your cushioned seat, the attendants are already moving. You know what this means. You don't need to ask. You don't need a name. You've been rehearsing for this moment, even if you didn't know it. A procession begins of whispers of glances, of hands tightening sashes and straightening folds. A pair of chamberlains appear, each more perfumed than the last, their eyes never quite meeting yours. They do not speak to you, they speak around you. One nods toward the entrance, the other gestures with two fingers meaning follow. And so you do. Your feet brush against carpet so thick you can't feel the stone underneath. You pass through a hall lit by high clerestory windows, casting rectangular beams of golden sunlight across mosaics too fine to step on. You've never been here before, though it seems the walls have been watching you for some time. On one side, a fresco shows a charioteer triumphant reining in 4 white horses. On the other, a veiled woman holding a laurel branch, her gaze cast down not in shame but in reverence. You walk between them perfectly framed. The chamber opens before you slowly. Not wide, not grand, not yet. First comes the anticipation. A foyer of sorts. Just you and a statue of Apollo, the god of harmony, light, poetry. The statue's eyes are blank, but you can feel them judging you. And perhaps that's the point. You wait as taught. Back straight, chin low, breathing calm, and then finally the doors to the atrium glide open. There is no throne. Nero never liked thrones. They reminded him too much of the Senate. Instead, there is a dais modest in size, but raised just enough that it forces everyone to look up. Draped over it are silks of deep carmine and ivory embroidered with golden vines. A couch, a table with goblets, a lyre resting idly. And there, half-shadowed by hanging drapes, sits the emperor. At last you see him. Nero is not how the rumors painted him. No wild-eyed monster. No beast of a man frothing at the mouth. What you see is a figure carved carefully by privilege and paranoia. The curve of his jaw speaks of vanity. The way he holds the stem of a fig pinched lightly between 2 fingers suggests someone long accustomed to being watched. He is young. Almost too young, but his eyes, they are old. Older than Rome itself. He does not look at you at first. He's looking past you, through you, towards something only he can see. A memory, perhaps, or a phantom. And then you feel it. The moment his eyes land, not on your face, but on a detail, a curl of your hair, a ring on your finger, the clasp of your robe, and whatever it is, it anchors him. You don't need words to know it worked. You have been seen, not as yourself, but as the echo he's been waiting for. This isn't an audience. It's a séance. The servants withdraw soundlessly as if a ritual has begun, and their presence might contaminate it. You're left standing on polished marble somewhere between a guest and a relic. Nero gestures slightly and you take your seat. Not too close, not too far. Everything must be measured. Time does not pass in a straight line anymore. You cannot say how long you remain in that room. Minutes, hours, years. It's all the same when the world narrows to the width of his gaze. He speaks softly, almost absent-mindedly, but not to you. To the space between you, the way someone might speak to a statue they've commissioned, to admire its accuracy, to mourn what it still cannot truly restore. And in this moment you understand. You are not his guest. You are his monument. Here's where history becomes slippery. Tacitus writes of Nero's obsession with lost beauty, but he never names names. Suetonius, ever the dramatist, claimed Nero tried to mold those around him into reflections of those he could not forget. He spoke of rehearsals of theater extended into life, but even Suetonius didn't grasp the full quiet of a moment like this. The aching stillness, the horror veiled in silk and ritual. Because it's not loud, it's not cruel, it's delicate, and that's what makes it worse. Nero doesn't ask questions. He doesn't test you. He simply observes, as if waiting for the ghost to step fully into your skin. You are not expected to speak, only to breathe, to exist. But that too is a performance. You adjust your posture. You tilt your head. You look at him with eyes not entirely your own, and something in him softens. He lifts a small emerald ring to his lips and presses it to his temple, as though communing with something beyond sight. A tidbit for the curious, some Romans believed emeralds could ease eye strain and reveal truths hidden by illusion. Nero himself is said to have watched gladiator fights through polished green stones, believing they helped him see more clearly. Now he uses one to gaze at you. Do you pass the test? Apparently so. You are dismissed without words. Just a flick of his fingers. But as you turn to leave, something odd happens. A servant meets you at the threshold carrying a shallow dish of water. You are instructed silently to wash your hands in it. A rite, a baptism, not of cleansing, of rebirth. Back in your chambers, no one speaks. The mood has shifted. The air feels heavier, but also somehow expectant. You've entered a new chapter, one where the rehearsals are over, and the role must be lived. From this point forward, you are no longer preparing to become someone else. You already are, and no one, not even yourself, is permitted to forget that. You wake earlier now, before the chambermaids knock, before the hallways stir with footsteps or the lyres start their morning lament in the garden courtyards. It isn't sleep that rouses you, it's the heaviness of expectation, as if the room itself is holding its breath, waiting to see if you've remembered your lines. And of course, you have. The robe they've chosen for you today lies folded at the edge of your bed, accompanied by sandals too ornate for walking. You study the cloth, soft Egyptian linen layered with a sheer overlay of saffron-dyed silk. Real saffron, not imitation. The pigment alone, drawn from thousands of crocus flowers, could feed a poor family for months. But here it's used to tint fabric no one outside the palace will ever see. You slip into it slowly, like donning a roll. The air smells faintly of almonds and pressed roses, the oils they've been massaging into your skin each morning. Every movement now feels rehearsed, not because you want it to be, but because that's how it's been taught. You rise from the bed and turn toward the mirror. A bronze plate polished to gleaming dullness, not clear enough to offer detail, but enough to confirm shape. Enough to confirm you're still becoming what he wants you to be. Behind you, the stylists arrive. 3 of them, always the same. One combs and oils your hair, winding it into looping knots held with pearl-tipped pins. Another traces kohl along your lashes with a delicate reed, just enough to deepen the shadow. The third holds out a fine veil, gauzy and light, barely concealing your features. It's not meant to hide you. It's meant to soften the truth of you like mist, covering a familiar statue, allowing the mind to pretend it's seeing something new. It's all part of the transformation. You're not sure when it became a ritual, this dressing. At first it seemed like pampering, a curious indulgence from a court obsessed with aesthetics. But now you understand it differently. Each morning is a sculpting, not of clay or marble, but of memory. Each pin, each fold of fabric is another chisel mark on the image they are carving from your body. And today the gown is heavier than usual, not in weight, but in meaning. Because today you are to appear beside the emperor, not as yourself, as something much more fragile and far more dangerous. You're led not through the side corridors this time, but through the open halls, where the statues of long-dead heroes gaze down at you with blank authority, where minor nobles and performers and officials glance up as you pass, trying not to stare too long, but always staring. Not because of who you are, but because they know who you're supposed to be. It's a kind of silent theater, one where everyone knows the plot, but no one names it. You descend the marble steps into the imperial peristyle where sunlight pierces through arched columns and dances over water in the reflecting pool. The emperor is already there, reclining slightly on a curved couch. He doesn't rise to greet you. He doesn't have to. You are seated beside him not by invitation, but by orchestration. And suddenly the air shifts. You feel it. It isn't spoken, but it's understood. The resemblance today is closer than it has ever been. The hairstyle just so. The tilt of the head. The veils drape across your shoulder. Even your scent, rosewater and myrrh, was chosen to match the one she favored. The empress he lost. The one you're being asked to remember. With your body. There is no applause. No grand announcement. Just the silent presence of witnesses. Senators, poets, praetorians, none of whom will write what they see today, but all of whom will remember. Because in that moment the past is made visible again, not in marble, not in painting, but in flesh. You are the echo, the softest kind of ghost, and somehow that makes you more powerful and more vulnerable than any statue ever could be. Historians would later argue over the details. Some believed Nero staged this as a form of grief theater. Others saw it as an extension of Roman rites where memory was sacred and the past was allowed to reappear through ritual and form. But here in the sunlight of the imperial garden, surrounded by perfumed guests pretending not to glance, the debate feels meaningless. Because the truth is in how your hand is placed beside his, in how he does not look at you, but past you, as if trying to catch a flicker of someone no longer there. And in that flicker you feel yourself fading, not dying, just receding. Your name, your voice, your private past, it all grows quieter in the back of your mind. What remains is the shape you've been asked to hold. A vessel, a performance, a reflection of grief so profound it needed a body to contain it. That body is now yours. And when you finally rise hours later, your legs are trembling not from exhaustion, but from the weight of being a memory made flesh. That night you are dressed again, this time for the feast, but this time the gown is white, ivory silk woven with thread of gold patterns that shimmer with each breath. Your hair is left down cascading over your shoulders. You are not a queen, not officially, but tonight the court will pretend you are, because that is what he wants, and what he wants Rome must provide. As you stand once more in the mirror's glow, the veil falling into place, you realize something deeper than fear. You are no longer playing a part. You are the part. And Rome, hungry, watchful, cruel in its attention, is watching, always watching. For in Nero's court, the most dangerous role is not that of an enemy. It's that of a memory brought back to life, and you've become unforgettable. even if the cost is everything you once were. By the time you step through the arched doorway of the amphitheater gallery, the crowd is already in motion, not shouting, not chanting, but murmuring. A soft, anticipatory hum like wind through dry reeds. Even at a distance, you can feel it against your skin. Rome itself is vibrating. The amphitheater is not yet the Colosseum. That great monument won't be finished until long after Nero is gone. But what stands before you now, the wooden amphitheater near the Campus Martius, is no less grand in spirit. Tiered benches rising high open to the sky, wrapped in crimson canopies to shield the elite from the sun. The stage below gleams faintly with polished sand, ready to receive spectacle. You are not here as a performer, and yet you are being watched. The emperor arrives with calculated delay, not so long as to offend, but long enough to make his entrance matter. His robes shimmer with embroidered laurel leaves, his tunic belted high like a Greek hero's. You walk 2 steps behind him, not too close, not too far. A rhythm that has been drilled into you without words. The crowd doesn't cheer. Not exactly. They rise in silence, more from obligation than awe. In this place, applause is a matter of survival. And today they know the story being told isn't one written in verses or masks. It's written on your face. Because today you sit beside Nero in full view of the Roman people, not hidden in a chamber, not veiled in shadow, but lit by daylight, crowned by implication. You sit on a low ivory stool at the emperor's side, never elevated, never central, but always in frame. When Nero speaks, you remain still. When he gestures to the crowd, you lower your gaze. Your presence is not about your words. It is about the illusion you maintain, the strange fusion of familiarity and silence. And the people see it. They remember her. Some never saw her in life, but they remember the statues, the coins, the wedding processions, the funeral silence. And now, they see you. Too similar to mistake, too different to forget. The performance begins. A tragic pantomime from the East. One of Nero's favorites. He commissioned it himself, allegedly wrote the lyrics. The actors move with exaggerated precision, their faces painted with thick theatrical masks. But even as the drama unfolds, the audience's eyes drift to the emperor's box. Not for the play, but for the real theater happening just above it. They are watching to see how he watches you. And he knows it, because as much as the people fear his wrath, they feed off his mourning. His obsession has become a kind of public ritual, one where the lines between grief and display, between memory and manipulation, blur until no one remembers what began as truth. You feel it most in the pauses, the silences between scenes when the audience quiets and the breeze moves through the awnings. That's when you catch glimpses of their expressions, some curious, some cautious, some just a few genuinely sorrowful. Not for him, for you. Because the story they've pieced together doesn't require words. They see what you've become and what you've lost to get here. The tidbit historians often debate comes from this very day. Some claim Nero wore an emerald ring to the theater that bore the likeness of his lost empress. That as he watched the stage, he turned it slowly on his finger, occasionally glancing from the ring to your face, comparing the illusion to the memory. There's no surviving ring, but there are eyewitness accounts of his hand resting on yours, not possessively, not romantically, just resting, as if to anchor you in place, as if to remind the crowd and perhaps himself that what once was lost has been found. Sort of. And as the performance crescendos, as the actor screams out in stylized agony, you find yourself unsure whether it is the sound from the stage or the silence inside you that rings louder. Because being a symbol you're learning is louder than any line. When the curtain falls and the emperor rises, so do you. As you exit the theater, the crowd leans forward slightly, craning for one last look. Not of him, of you. of the shadow that has somehow become the show. And as you step back into the corridor, leaving the sunlight behind you, feel the warmth evaporate from your skin. The applause never comes, because it wasn't meant for you. Not really. It was meant for her. And you are merely the echo that answered. Time, it turns out, is no healer. It's only a stagehand changing the curtains, shifting the set, replacing one emperor's script with the next. But backstage, the roles remain. Rome does fall eventually, not with the drama its poets loved, but with a strange, quiet unraveling. Nero's final days are not grandiose. They are scattered and sad. His enemies gather, his allies abandon him, and when the end comes, he flees unshaved and half-dressed to the villa of a freedman. He dies in a ditch, whispering that no one will weep for him. But you are not at his side. You were never really with him, not in the way people imagine. You were beside him, yes, around him, shaped to orbit his pain. But when he vanishes from history, there is no dramatic finale for you, no mention in the triumphal inscriptions, no place in the ruins. And yet, your role endures, because the empire, even in its fragments, remembers what you symbolized. Not your name, perhaps, but your image, your presence, your usefulness. Some later sources hint that after Nero's death, you were forced into a mock ceremony, dressed once more in imperial silk, weeping theatrically as if you'd lost a husband. A cruel parody of grief. A puppet grieving her puppeteer. No one knows what became of you after that. Maybe you disappeared into obscurity. Maybe you walked out of history like a shadow slipping behind a column. Or maybe you were never meant to be found. Because the truth is, your story was never supposed to be yours. It was built for someone else. You were a placeholder, a projection, a beautiful replica of what no longer was. And that role doesn't retire just because the emperor does. Even now the city remembers you, not for your voice, but for your silence. And the role, that strange glimmering cage, is still out there. It reappears in every court where grief becomes a spectacle, in every palace where memory becomes a weapon, and in every story just like this one where someone is chosen not to be themselves, but to be someone else entirely. But your part in this tale gently closes here. A breath, a pause, not an ending. Just the soft hush between one story and the next. Because across oceans and centuries and kingdoms far removed from Rome, others were chosen in your place. Not out of love, but out of longing. Not for who they were, but for who they resembled. Let's drift there now softly, gently. Because your story, while singular, was never alone. The walls gleam with gold leaf and ghost stories. You step softly through the hall of mirrors, the air heavy with perfume, the kind that lingers in lace and memory. Every footfall echoes on the polished parquet like a question you're not allowed to ask. You're not alone, but you're never truly seen either. In the gilded dream world of Versailles, visibility and invisibility twist together until you no longer know which one you are. That is perhaps the point. You were chosen, though not for your talents or charm, not even for your birth. No, you were selected because you look like her, the one who came before, the one they cannot forget. It started quietly, a sideways glance from a duchess. A note passed through a lady-in-waiting. Then came the summons, softly worded, carefully arranged. You were brought to court, not as yourself, but as a possibility, a maybe. A living ghost. Now you glide through salons filled with silks, and suspicion always watched, but never spoken to directly about what you represent. The courtiers gossip in corners, sipping chocolate, and pretending not to stare. She walks like her. Someone whispers behind a fan. Even the way she folds her gloves, it's uncanny. You don't remember learning to fold gloves, but somehow you do it exactly as she did. The illusion is so convincing, you begin to wonder whether it's magic or just training that makes memory stick where it was never meant to. Because you are no longer here to be you. You are here to remind someone of someone else. That's your role. A stand-in, a shadow, a tribute dressed in organza. In the late court of Louis XV, where grief often wore rouge and powdered wigs, some women were chosen for their resemblance to mistresses or wives who had died, especially those who left abruptly, tragically, or too young. The pain of absence twisted into obsession, and Versailles being Versailles gave obsession a place to bloom. You learn to smile the way she smiled. You tilt your head just so. You begin to memorize her letters, her favorite colors, the kind of music she preferred in the evening. These aren't idle curiosities. They are survival. Because in a palace where identity is currency, and yours belongs to another, the only way to stay safe is to become the performance so flawlessly that no one notices the curtain. There was one girl, blonde, modest, barely 16, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Madame de Pompadour in her younger days. After the real Pompadour passed, whispers grew that the king kept the girl in his garden salon, not as a lover, but as a memory. She was dressed in Pompadour's style, trained to speak in the same melodic phrasing, even taught to respond to her name in private audiences. Historians still debate whether she truly understood her role or merely followed the script out of fear. But they agree on one thing: her life was not her own. And now it is your turn. They call you Mademoiselle, but they mean her. When they hand you a fan, they expect you to hold it the way she did, tipped just below the cheekbone, fluttering like a breath of flirtation. When you dance, it must be her rhythm, not yours. When you dine, your preferences are irrelevant. You order what she once favored, and if you make a face at the taste of liver pâté and candied violets, it's noted, and quietly corrected. At times you wonder what happens to your own memories. Where do they go when you make room for hers? Do they shrink like dried roses tucked in an old book you no longer open? Or do they fade entirely, leaving behind the scent, but not the story? The wig makers work long hours to match the exact curl pattern. Seamstresses rework gowns to reflect portraits painted a decade earlier. You are being constructed from references like a living museum piece with breath and blush. In one ornate salon, its ceiling painted with cherubs and tragedies, there hangs a portrait of the woman you now echo. You weren't meant to see it, but you did. And in that moment, something chilled you deeper than any court intrigue. She looks nothing like you. Or perhaps, she looks like what they want to remember, what they wish had stayed. Which means you've been molded, not from her truth, but from their fantasy. The woman you're meant to become never really existed, not as they tell it. It's then you realize this is not grief. It's control. Because what Versailles feared more than death was unpredictability. And what better way to manage grief than to repurpose it into a ritual, you the vessel, them the audience. The court, a stage that never dims. Tidbits drift down like powdered sugar from patisseries. One footman tells of a chambermaid who once lost her position for speaking your real name aloud. Another whispers that you are paid in silence. No allowance, no titles, just gowns and anonymity. Better than exile, he mutters, though his eyes suggest he's not sure that's true. Behind all this is a very Versailles twist. A quiet cruelty laced in beauty. Even your punishments are elegant. If you displease, you're not scolded. You're replaced. Another girl, another face, another version of the memory. The court applauds again and history resets. Historians still argue whether Louis XV encouraged these illusions as a way to soothe his own losses or to keep others in check. Some claim the practice was an open secret. Others believe it was confined to a few inner chambers never discussed in daylight. What is clear is that Versailles had a memory problem. It remembered selectively, and it preferred nostalgia over truth. So you drift. There's a moment late one evening when you sit by the garden pond. The moon reflects in the water, and for a second so do you. Not her. You. Barefoot, your hair undone a curl falling out of place. And in that reflection you catch something rare yourself without the layers. You are not a ghost. You are not an echo. But in Versailles that may never matter. The bell for evening supper rings. You rise and dust off your skirts. A serving girl waits by the hedge holding a shawl the exact shade she would have worn. You take it and wrap yourself in her warmth, not yours. And just like that, the girl by the pond disappears. Only the memory remains. You return to the palace backlit by candlelight, a flicker in the long hallway of half-remembered women. As you pass a marble bust of her likeness, you smile with her lips, stand with her poise, and vanish into the role once more. There's no applause, no curtain call, only the quiet weight of being chosen. You wake before the sun rises, though you are never truly asleep. Sleep in the Forbidden City comes in careful fragments, measured between silken drapes and ritual footsteps. You are never quite allowed to drift fully into rest, for your life belongs to someone else. Now a name whispered in corridors, a silhouette glimpsed through lacquered screens. You are one of the Emperor's shadows, not a concubine, not a consort, not quite a person at all. You were brought here not asked. You were selected not for your family name or the brilliance of your poems, but for a face, a symmetry, a gesture that reminded someone of someone the Emperor used to love, or perhaps still loves. You never got a clear answer. No one speaks plainly here. In Qing Dynasty China, the Forbidden City was not merely a palace. It was a world within a world guarded not only by stone walls, but by protocol so dense it could suffocate the strongest will. Among the many women who entered its labyrinth were those chosen not as individuals but as echoes. It is said the Qianlong Emperor, mourning a lost consort, once requested that a young court lady be trained to mimic her gait and intonation to soothe his sorrow, or perhaps to give it shape. You feel that weight now every time you bow, each movement rehearsed with punishing precision. When you walk, it's with the posture dictated in hand-copied scrolls. When you speak, it's with the lilting rhythm of a woman you've never met. When you smile, it must be delicate, just enough to remind, never enough to assert. Your name is used sparingly. In private, you're called by the title she once held. In public, you're part of the scenery, silent, painted present. At first, the clothes enthrall you, silk embroidered with dragons, and phoenixes' hairpieces heavy with pearls and cloisonne. But quickly you learn these are not decorations. They are restraints. Every robe you wear was worn by her. Every hairpin a token of remembrance. You are draped in memory until your own reflection becomes foreign. There are rules, of course. You must never look directly at the Emperor unless summoned. You must never contradict an older concubine, no matter how cruel her commands. And above all, you must never speak of her, the one you impersonate, the one whose absence feeds your presence. Yet the palace whispers. One maid swears she saw you cry during the Lantern Festival, and reported it because the woman you echo never wept in public. Another swears the Emperor once mistook you in candlelight, and called you by her name, then didn't correct himself. You wish that moment had frightened you, but it didn't. It chilled you, because for a single breath you felt real. The strange truth of your existence is that you are both sacred and disposable. Sacred because you serve the Emperor's grief. Disposable because the grief may change its shape tomorrow. There's a tale of another stand-in before you selected to fill the void left by a favored daughter lost too young. The girl was paraded through pavilions, dressed in childhood gowns, expected to speak in a higher voice and eat from smaller dishes. When she outgrew the illusion, she was quietly reassigned. No one knows where she went. Your own illusion may end the same way, not with ceremony, with absence, Still you carry on. You learn the brushstrokes of her calligraphy. You breathe jasmine smoke before entering an audience chamber, just as she did. You begin to forget your original voice. You recite her poems until the verses become lullabies that rock you into something like peace. It's in this haze of borrowed identity that you witness something extraordinary. One night while performing a tea ceremony in the outer hall, you glimpse a figure behind a golden screen. Not the emperor, another woman watching, a mirror image. You recognize her dress, it's yours. Or hers. The one you thought was lost when a seam tore during the Dragon Boat Festival. She lifts a hand and you realize she too is performing, for someone else. The emperor doesn't have one ghost. He has many. Each woman in this palace may be an echo of someone else. And the deeper truth is even more disquieting: none of you are loved. Only the memory is. A memory too perfect to be contradicted. Your identity is a thread. If you pull it, the entire embroidery might collapse. So you do not pull. You bow, you smile, you walk as taught. And still there is a you beneath all that. She surfaces rarely, maybe in the garden, when no one watches, or in a forbidden laugh shared with a eunuch who remembers his sister's name. You do not know how long you will be kept, or what will happen when your illusion fails. But you begin in small ways to leave traces. A small note folded beneath a teacup. A poem written in your original dialect. A pause before answering to her name. Because even here in the palace of rules and rituals, rebellion can bloom quietly. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is what memory truly is. Not the repetition of the past, but the flicker of something new inside the old. As you lie down that evening beneath brocade blankets not chosen by you, you let your eyes drift to the painted ceiling. It tells a myth of a woman who rose from sorrow to become a star. You wonder if she too began as someone else. And as sleep arrives, not fully, but enough, you allow yourself one final thought. Even if you were chosen to be someone else, you are the one who wakes each morning. And in that there is a kind of truth no emperor can rewrite. You don't remember arriving here. The corridor was dim, lined with latticed windows, half screened by embroidered silk. The hush was so deep, it seemed like sound itself had been forbidden. Someone whispered your new name to you twice, just to be sure it stuck. But the name wasn't yours, not really. It had belonged to someone else. And everyone here seemed to know that but you. The palace compound is nestled behind layered courtyards and winding walls somewhere within Kaifeng in the heart of the northern Song Court. The architecture feels almost like a maze of silk and shadow, gently curving rooftops, red lacquered beams and ponds, so still they reflect not only the sky but the secrets hidden beneath it. You're shown into a pavilion with painted folding screens and delicate porcelain vases. The scent of plum blossom lingers, even though it's not the season. They call this the Pavilion of Long Remembrance. There's no mention of who exactly you're supposed to resemble, at least not directly. But each step of your day suggests her. From the hairpin they press into your bun to the ink-scented paper, upon which you are instructed to copy out poems. Poems she once favored. A few lines of Su Shi's verses inked over and over again, until your hand mimics not just the stroke order, but the hesitations of someone else's memory. No one tells you to smile a certain way. But when you do smile, there's a moment of pause from your attendants, an almost imperceptible nod, as though they are pleased with your progress. You are not being transformed into a lady of refinement. You are being reassembled into a ghost. Each morning begins with the same ritual, the dressing. Silk garments in muted shades, lotus gray water, blue pale jade. The palette, you are told gently, is in keeping with propriety, but the eunuch supervising your wardrobe remarks almost offhandedly that she used to favor the same tones. Then he looks away, careful not to say more. You've come to learn that's how it always is. Quiet nudges, gentle reminders. You begin to sense that the one who came before is not simply remembered, she is required. Whoever she was, her absence became an unbearable silence in someone's world. And so here you are, called in to fill the echo. You start to ask yourself questions you hadn't considered before. Who was she? How did she die? Did she ever have a choice? And perhaps most haunting of all, does anyone miss you, the person you were before this began? You were not born into nobility, but you are treated now as though you were, at least on the surface. Food arrives in cloisonné trays, steamed dumplings, clear soups, rice scented with osmanthus. Your chamber is always warm even in winter. The calligraphy lessons are long, but the tutors are patient. The poetry they assign you is always the same kind, melancholy, wistful, full of longing for someone or something gone. You memorize verses about plum blossoms falling out of season cranes, flying north alone, dreams of a face that cannot be touched. One poem in particular keeps returning. It speaks of a single orchid blooming behind the palace wall, unseen by all but one pair of eyes. You recite it until the lines come without thought, and then one day you hear it echoed softly back at you. The voice is from a distance behind a curtain of gauze. The emperor himself does not often appear directly, but his presence is like the moon unseen during the day, but everything bends toward it. That day when you repeated the poem aloud, he murmured the final line with you, not as if to correct you, as if remembering. He does not call you by the name you were born with, only by hers, and yet he is not unkind. He leaves small tokens, painted fans, fresh peonies, strings of jade beads. These are not grand gifts. They are familiar things, things someone once loved, and in that they become heavy with implication. Historians still argue whether such substitutions were common at the song court. Some say this case was rare an indulgence by a grief-stricken ruler who blurred the line between memory and desire. Others believe there may have been more unrecorded women who lived entire lives inside borrowed identities, their real selves buried in the dust of protocol. What is certain is that your role is not ceremonial. You are expected to speak, to move, even to sigh as she once did. A chambermaid once confessed after too much wine that the emperor once kept a small portrait of her in a sandalwood box, that it was brought out nightly before you arrived. And now it is gone, replaced by you. This is a different kind of power, not domination, not fear, but something more insidious, the quiet rewriting of one life into the template of another. You are not in chains. You are in costume, and that perhaps is harder to fight. Even the musicians have changed their tune. In the evenings when the piper plays, you hear songs that you know were composed years ago, elegies and love ballads written for someone no longer here. You are invited to perform them, not as yourself, but as her. At first the court ladies looked at you with veiled curiosity, then gradually with pity, and now something more unsettling, acceptance. They have stopped calling you the new one. They call you by her name without hesitation. You've started dreaming of places you've never been. A garden with rockeries shaped like dragon spines. A bridge over a koi pond that never existed in your own memories. In the dreams you are dressed differently. You smile differently. And when you wake sometimes you are not sure whether you are dreaming her dreams or remembering them. One quirky but real tidbit from this period: it was not unheard of for concubines in elite households to have their correspondence and poetry archived under pseudonyms, or in some cases retroactively attributed to others. In effect, women's voices could be rebranded to suit the dynastic narrative, just as their faces could be dressed to match lost ideals. In a way, this makes you wonder, if your own letters were found years from now, would anyone know who wrote them? Or would they be filed under a different name attached to a different face, and mistaken for someone else's longing? The day you are told to preside over a tea ceremony for a visiting minister is the day you realize you've passed a final unspoken test. You pour the tea exactly as she used to. You recite a poem from memory, one they say was her favorite. The minister bows and remarks on how little has changed, and no one corrects him. At night, the incense burns softer now. You are given her favorite blend, sandalwood with a touch of cinnamon, a rare mixture once imported from the South Seas, now only used in your chamber. It smells warm, familiar. It makes you feel strange things. You cannot tell if you feel comforted or erased. You walk to the mirror again. The bronze no longer surprises you. The face looking back is your own, but it's also not. It is the face the emperor wanted to remember, a face the palace could not let go. And in your posture, your voice, your silence, you have become her echo. But perhaps the echo has depth. Perhaps within this mirrored life, you've learned a strength you didn't expect. To survive in such a role is no small feat. To retain even fragments of yourself beneath layers of curated memory, it is a quiet defiance. Not all rebellions are loud. And perhaps somewhere the real you is still watching, waiting. The lamp dims as the night deepens. Outside, a pair of white cranes cross the moon. You listen to their wings disappear into the sky. And you wonder if you too could vanish. Would anyone notice which self you took with you? The story of the lost woman continues in your breath, your steps, your gestures. But one day, long after the dynasty fades, someone may look back at a painting, a poem, a name, and wonder who was the real woman behind it. You smile softly. You may never know if you've succeeded in becoming her, but you have survived her, and for now, that is enough. You first enter the palace through a sliding panel, barely higher than your shoulders. You bow as you pass, not just out of courtesy, but because the ceiling of this wing seems built to encourage it. Your sandals are removed at the threshold, exchanged for silken socks dyed in indigo and patterned with clouds, imperial clouds. You're not royalty, but someone has decided you should look close enough. The scent of powdered incense follows you in like a hush, clinging to your robes, your sleeves, your very skin. The women who guide you do not speak much. Their faces are unreadable, framed by layers of hair that have been oiled and brushed so many times, it reflects the candlelight. You've heard the stories how some are trained not to smile too widely, lest their teeth betray too much joy. Joy was once yours to express. That time has ended. Now your face must echo a memory. The walls of this pavilion are thin, made of stretched paper and wood, and yet nothing escapes them. Here in Heian, Japan, silence is not absence, it is language. A woman's glance holds meaning. A pause in the music is a statement. A missed step in a court performance can echo longer than any spoken insult. You've been trained to understand this. Or rather, you've been trained to make sure no one ever sees the effort behind your understanding. Your name is no longer your own. Not officially, not within these walls. The man you perform for an imperial noble whose favor could elevate or erase you has not said it since you arrived. He calls you her, always her. At first you thought it was a mistake, a slip, but the maids do it too. The attendants whisper it. Even the handmaid who washes your hair murmurs it while combing out the night oils. You realize gradually, painfully, that they don't mean her as a title. They mean her the woman who came before, the one whose place you now fill like a shadow, stretched over fading light. You do not know her name. It is not spoken, but her presence lingers in everything you're asked to wear, to do, to feel. The kimono they bring you is not cut for your shoulders, yet you are made to wear it. Its long trailing sleeves snag on every surface, every memory. You are taught how she moved. You are taught how she played the biwa, her fingers barely brushing the strings like drifting mist. You are taught how she bowed, not too low, not too abruptly. Everything had to feel like poetry, falling into itself. At night you're asked to recite poems in her voice. Poems she once read aloud during New Year gatherings, or during moon viewing festivals on the palace veranda. You don't know whether the words are hers, or whether someone simply assigned them to her long after she had vanished. Either way, they are yours now. Yours to perform, not to believe. Historians still debate whether these stand-ins were formally acknowledged by the court or existed as quiet secrets within the palace. Some argue that poetry diaries from the time hint at such substitutions, veiled lines referencing a lover who returns in form but not in flame. Others believe the records have been romanticized, their tragic tone the result of retroactive nostalgia rather than historical truth. But within the walls of the Heian Palace, such debates are irrelevant. What matters is that you are here and you are not you. One of the more eccentric customs you're expected to mimic is the ritual of scent layering. The previous woman, your origin, as some attendants put it, had a famously unique fragrance, a combination of clove cinnamon bark and a hint of camphor oil pressed into sachets and tucked inside her sleeves. Now that mixture is recreated for you, pounded into tiny packets and sewn into the folds of your clothing. You are forbidden from wearing any other scent. Even your bedding carries it, as if you must leave a trail of ghostly familiarity wherever you lie. Your meals are selected not for your own preferences, but for hers. The palace cook is given old records, her supposed favorites grilled freshwater eel, pickled plum rice seasoned with yuzu rind. These are prepared for you without question, and though you've never cared for eel, you learn to smile politely and leave a small bite uneaten as you've been told she did. It is not all cruelty. There is admiration, too, in the way people look at you, a kind of tender confusion. The same court lady who reminds you to tilt your chin a little higher while walking will also spend an hour smoothing the creases from your collar, whispering, so alike with something like awe. It is as if they too are caught in a dream, recreating a moment they've convinced themselves can be reborn, if only everyone plays their part correctly. And yet the longer you wear her skin, the less you remember your own. You begin to dream her dreams. You wake up humming poems you don't recall learning. Your posture changes. Your laughter becomes quieter, gentler, punctuated with a hand raised just so to conceal your teeth. One evening, while staring at your reflection in the surface of your tea, you realize you no longer recognize the voice inside your head. It speaks as she would have spoken, measured, graceful, detached. There is no formal ceremony to mark the transition, no right to say you are her now. It simply happens. A slip of a name, a change in how you respond, the moment you stop correcting people. The day your signature becomes hers, not yours. One night during a festival honoring ancestral spirits, you are asked to perform in front of the noble himself. The garden is lit with floating lanterns, and the perfumed smoke of sandalwood drifts through the evening air. You sit on a lacquered dais, your sleeves spread like wings, the biwa resting in your lap. The melody you play is not yours. It was hers, documented, remembered, revived. The court watches silently, not applauding, but holding its breath. And when you finish, the noble does not look pleased or impressed. He looks haunted. You understand then what this has always been about. Not love, not beauty, not even remembrance. It is about denial. You are a vessel for grief, molded in silence, sustained by a court unwilling to let go. You are the body someone refused to bury. In the quiet that follows your performance, a leaf falls into the garden pond, sending out ripples that distort your reflection. Just for a second you think you see her there instead of you. Not your face, but hers gazing back. And you don't look away. A quirky detail from Heian court life stands out. Women often blacken their teeth as a mark of beauty and maturity, a custom called ohaguro. The woman you've replaced may have done this, and now it's expected of you too. It is one of the final rituals you accept. You sit still as your teeth are painted one by one into gleaming darkness. In the mirror you do not see a performer anymore. You see a relic, an echo. Outside the palace the world is shifting. The Fujiwara clan rises storms of political change brew beyond the painted screens. But in here, none of that matters. Time moves in circles, not lines. And in those circles you have been placed like a poem, written on a fan-delicate impermanent, destined to fade but beautiful in the moment. When the noble eventually marries another, no one tells you directly. You only notice that the scent sachets change, that the biwa is stored away, that your name is suddenly strangely spoken again softly, as if it were something fragile and forgotten. You are no longer her, but you are not quite you either. You remain in the palace like a favored screen or treasured inkstone, not thrown away but no longer opened. You become part of the furnishings of memory. And in that stillness, in that suspended identity, you begin to wonder which version of you will survive history. The girl you were, the woman you were sculpted into, or neither. But before you answer, the paper wall to your left slides open. A new attendant appears, bowing low, holding a letter with unfamiliar handwriting. Another summons, another memory to inhabit, another echo to step into. And so you rise. Soft footsteps carry you out of the room, the hem of your kimono brushing across the polished floor like the turning of a page. The court has many stories, and yours is far from over. The hall grows dim behind you, and in its fading light you begin to feel the weight of one history giving way to another. We're nearly at the final stretches now, but first we turn to a tale, whispered in verses and written in starlight, across the deserts of Persia. You don't wake with the sun. You are the sun, or so they tell you. From the moment you were taken into the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, Coricancha, your life has belonged not to your village, nor your mother, nor even to yourself. It belongs to Inti, the sun god radiant and eternal, and by extension to the Sapa Inca, the living embodiment of that divine fire. You are a chosen one, a young Akala, selected for your beauty, your calm demeanor, your quiet footfall and long fingers, but most of all for your stillness. You don't resist when they cut your hair and burn the strands over sacred fire. You don't flinch when they paint your cheeks with crushed cochineal red that bleeds brighter than any flower. Your name, the one your family whispered with love, is left behind, like a shawl too small to carry forward. From this day on, you are a virgin of the sun. Your days will be measured not by seasons, but by rituals. Not by your age, but by how closely your hands can imitate the movements of the one who came before you. The Coricancha is no prison, and yet you are not free. You walk across courtyards paved with gold sheets, and bow before idols with eyes made of crystal. You sleep on wool as soft as a cloud, yet even in dreams your spine remains straight. The golden walls seem to glow even at night, catching candlelight in their hammered seams, as if the god they honor never truly sets. You're told it is an honor beyond measure to live here, to serve, to remain pure. But you've begun to notice how that purity looks very different, depending on who is speaking. You are taught not to speak unless spoken to. You are instructed in the art of weaving garments not for yourself, but for the emperor and his wives. You are trained to recite long chants in Quechua, words you do not fully understand, but must say with a flawless tone. When you are not learning, you are praying. When you are not praying, you are cleaning. And when you are not cleaning, you are waiting for what you aren't quite sure. But one evening the high priest comes and studies your face longer than usual. His eyes are not cruel, not warm either, just searching. He speaks to the matron and gestures not at you, but through you. That same week you are summoned to stand before the Sapa Inca. You've seen him from afar before, always high on his litter, carried by strong arms, surrounded by dancers and noblemen. But up close he is surprisingly still. His robes shimmer with the feathers of jungle birds, his headdress so tall it seems to scrape the sky itself. He doesn't look at you with desire, nor kindness. What you see is something more complex recognition. You have been chosen again not to serve in the temple now, but to serve as a living vessel for one who is no longer alive, a daughter of the sun who was lost to illness or taken by fate. Her name, her likeness, her gestures, they must not fade, and so you will keep them. The other girls whisper that it is a great honor. They help prepare you. Your hair is styled in the pattern of the deceased, a braided coil wrapped in gold wire. You are given new shoes, ceremonial slippers she once wore. The cloth they dress you in was hers untouched, stored in a sealed box of cedar and obsidian. They call you by her name gently at first, then insistently until your real name begins to blur. There are ceremonies where you sit in her place. You do not speak. She would not have. You eat her favorite dish maize cakes with honey and coca leaf, though it makes your stomach turn. Her gestures are now yours, how she held her chin, how she smiled with only one side of her mouth, how she walked with her hands tucked in her sleeves. You perform all of it, and you perform it well, too well. You begin to forget which thoughts are yours and which were hers. In dreams you see her face, not as a ghost, but as a memory. You've adopted one that speaks to you from the other side of the sun. Historians still debate whether the sun daughters of the Inca truly replaced specific individuals, or whether they simply became symbolic representations of divine ideals. But archaeological evidence from Cusco shows that some temple women were buried not under their birth names, but under names passed down through generations, names that once belonged to others. You once believed that death marked the end of a role. Now you understand that in certain courts, especially those who see the divine in human form, memory itself becomes ritual. And ritual does not die easily. You wonder if the Sapa Inca grieves the woman you were meant to embody, or if this is simply a way to preserve the shape of power. In the way your chin lifts, perhaps he sees the last time she laughed. In the way your eyes glance downward, perhaps he sees the moment she turned from him, never to return. But no one says these things aloud. The temple is too silent for doubt. The high priest once told you that the sun never forgets its daughters. But you are beginning to fear that what the sun remembers is not who they were, but who others wanted them to be. Still, you fulfill the role. When messengers arrive from distant provinces, you stand among the procession and smile as she would have. When the emperor gives thanks to Inti for good harvests, your voice joins the chorus of praise. And when visitors ask your name, the attendants provide the name that isn't yours, with such ease that even you have stopped correcting them. There's a tidbit scholars often overlook: some of the Incas' sun virgins, while cloistered and sacred, were eventually selected for political marriages to secure alliances or demonstrate divine favor. A few were even sacrificed in mountain rituals to embody celestial purity, but others lived long lives within the temple walls, quietly reenacting the glories of someone no longer there. You begin to mark your years not in candles or moons, but in how many times you've been mistaken for her. And one day, in the privacy of your chamber, you run your fingers through your hair, still dyed with the ashes of sacred fire, and whisper your true name, just to hear it again. The sound is strange, thin, almost like it belongs to someone else now. As the city beyond the temple walls celebrates the festival of Inti Raymi, the streets are alive with flutes, drums, and the scent of roasted maize. You hear the joy and wonder if anyone out there remembers who you were before this, before you became someone else's memory. And yet you are not angry. Not exactly. There is something tranquil in this silence, something reverent, even if it is borrowed. You return to your chamber where gold shimmers across the walls like sunlight through water. You lie down on your woven mat, fold your hands over your chest in the way she used to, and breathe in deeply. The air is thin, but you were trained for that. And outside, the sun sets slowly behind the mountains, not knowing perhaps that one of its daughters is still awake, quietly remembering what no one else will. There is no empire now, no golden sun temple gleaming in the morning haze, no burning braziers in Rome or silent cloisters in the forbidden city, no grand palaces where veils are placed over mirrors to shield the emperor from his own reflection. The halls have gone quiet. The gods have left their statues. And yet, their shadows remain. And so do you. Not as a face carved into marble, not as a name etched on a stone wall, but as something quieter, the breath behind a ritual, the unspoken cost of someone else's grief. You may have thought this was just a tale about emperors and empires, about Nero and Sporus, and those chosen by power to live as echoes of the dead. But no. This is also a story about memory, about how grief doesn't always bury the past, but sometimes tries to recreate it, and how the people asked to carry that burden, the Sporus, the concubines, the sun daughters, the dancers were more than just vessels. They were people, real people with thoughts and hearts and names that didn't always survive the telling. They were asked to disappear, and yet they never really did. Look closely and you'll see them. You'll see them in the fragments of a mirror buried in a collapsed Roman villa, in the silk sleeves of a forgotten performer's costume, tucked away in a Kyoto archive, in a golden headdress from Cusco, bent but not broken, hidden away for centuries, in a cave high in the Andes, in letters between Persian wives and court advisors, wondering aloud if the new concubine was a copy of the one who had passed, and whether love could ever live in such a reflection. Even today you see them, not in temples or courts, but in photographs that look just a little too staged, in magazine covers that insist someone has the same look as a legend long gone, in songs that try to resurrect a voice that can no longer sing. The story always finds new forms. And what does that say about us? Perhaps it means we're still trying to keep people with us, that we fear ending so much we sometimes ask the living to hold the shape of what we lost. And maybe that's a kind of love, a difficult one, a dangerous one, but love still. Or perhaps it's a kind of forgetting dressed up as remembrance, a desire to avoid grief by rehearsing a version of joy we no longer have. It's complicated, but what's not complicated is this: the people behind the roles, the ones who were chosen, shaped, renamed, they mattered, not because they played the part well, but because they existed at all, because they endured. Sporus endured. Through shame, spectacle, and sorrow, his story survived, not because Nero preserved it, but because others remembered what it cost him. The concubine in the forbidden city endured. Her real name may be lost, but her image remained on a fan, a flicker of silk, in the corner of a painted screen. The temple girl in Cusco endured, not as a goddess, but as a person who once whispered her true name when no one was listening. And you listening to this, perhaps in the quiet of your room before sleep, takes you. You carry them now too, in your imagination, in the time you gave to this story, in the gentle pause that lingers once the last word is spoken, and maybe that's the softest kind of justice there is. So tonight, as you rest, remember this: you don't have to be a ruler to shape the future. Sometimes all it takes is remembering the forgotten, listening to the silence, and honoring the people history nearly erased. Because every time we tell their story, not as legends, but as lives, they live again. Thank you for walking with us through this quiet corner of history. If stories like this help you sleep, or help you feel just a little more connected to the long, strange tapestry of human memory, you're always welcome here. You can subscribe or not. You can leave a comment or simply hold the silence. But if you do feel like sharing what stayed with you tonight, what part of this story stirred something in you, I read them all. Now, close your eyes. The past will wait. And morning, when it comes, will find you a little softer than before. Sleep well. You don't wake with the sun. You are the sun. Or so they tell you. From the moment you were taken into the Temple of the Sun in Cusco, Coricancha, your life has belonged not to your village, nor your mother, nor even to yourself. It belongs to Inti, the sun god radiant and eternal, and by extension to the Sapa Inca, the living embodiment of that divine fire. You are a chosen one, a young Akala, selected for your beauty, your calm demeanor, your quiet footfall and long fingers, but most of all for your stillness. You don't resist when they cut your hair and burn the strands over sacred fire. You don't flinch when they paint your cheeks with crushed cochineal red that bleeds brighter than any flower. Your name, the one your family whispered with love, is left behind, like a shawl too small to carry forward. From this day on, you are a virgin of the sun. Your days will be measured not by seasons, but by rituals. Not by your age, but by how closely your hands can imitate the movements of the one who came before you. The Coricancha is no prison, and yet you are not free. You walk across courtyards paved with gold sheets, and bow before idols with eyes made of crystal. You sleep on wool as soft as a cloud, yet even in dreams your spine remains straight. The golden walls seem to glow even at night, catching candlelight in their hammered seams, as if the god they honor never truly sets. You're told it is an honor beyond measure to live here, to serve, to remain pure. But you've begun to notice how that purity looks very different, depending on who is speaking. You are taught not to speak unless spoken to. You are instructed in the art of weaving garments not for yourself, but for the emperor and his wives. You are trained to recite long chants in Quechua, words you do not fully understand, but must say with a flawless tone. When you are not learning, you are praying. When you are not praying, you are cleaning. And when you are not cleaning, you are waiting for what you aren't quite sure. But one evening the high priest comes and studies your face longer than usual. His eyes are not cruel, not warm either, just searching. He speaks to the matron and gestures not at you, but through you. That same week you are summoned to stand before the Sapa Inca. You've seen him from afar before, always high on his litter, carried by strong arms, surrounded by dancers and noblemen. But up close he is surprisingly still. His robes shimmer with the feathers of jungle birds, his headdress so tall it seems to scrape the sky itself. He doesn't look at you with desire, nor kindness. What you see is something more complex recognition. You have been chosen again, not to serve in the temple now, but to serve as a living vessel for one who is no longer alive, a daughter of the sun who was lost to illness or taken by fate. Her name, her likeness, her gestures, they must not fade, and so you will keep them. The other girls whisper that it is a great honor. They help prepare you. Your hair is styled in the pattern of the deceased, a braided coil wrapped in gold wire. You are given new shoes, ceremonial slippers she once wore. The cloth they dress you in was hers untouched, stored in a sealed box of cedar and obsidian. They call you by her name gently at first, then insistently until your real name begins to blur. There are ceremonies where you sit in her place. You do not speak. She would not have. You eat her favorite dish maize cakes with honey and coca leaf, though it makes your stomach turn. Her gestures are now yours, how she held her chin, how she smiled with only one side of her mouth, how she walked with her hands tucked in her sleeves. You perform all of it, and you perform it well, too well. You begin to forget which thoughts are yours and which were hers. In dreams you see her face, not as a ghost, but as a memory you've adopted, one that speaks to you from the other side of the sun. Historians still debate whether the sun daughters of the Inca truly replaced specific individuals, or whether they simply became symbolic representations of divine ideals. But archaeological evidence from Cusco shows that some temple women were buried not under their birth names, but under names passed down through generations, names that once belonged to others. You once believed that death marked the end of a role. Now you understand that in certain courts, especially those who see the divine in human form, memory itself becomes ritual. And ritual does not die easily. You wonder if the Sapa Inca grieves the woman you were meant to embody, or if this is simply a way to preserve the shape of power. In the way your chin lifts, perhaps he sees the last time she laughed. In the way your eyes glance downward, perhaps he sees the moment she turned from him, never to return. But no one says these things aloud. The temple is too silent for doubt. The high priest once told you that the sun never forgets its daughters. But you are beginning to fear that what the sun remembers is not who they were, but who others wanted them to be. Still, you fulfill the role. When messengers arrive from distant provinces, you stand among the procession and smile as she would have. When the emperor gives thanks to Inti for good harvests, your voice joins the chorus of praise. And when visitors ask your name, the attendants provide the name that isn't yours, with such ease that even you have stopped correcting them. There's a tidbit scholars often overlook: some of the Incas' sun virgins, while cloistered and sacred, were eventually selected for political marriages to secure alliances or demonstrate divine favor. A few were even sacrificed in mountain rituals to embody celestial purity, but others lived long lives within the temple walls, quietly reenacting the glories of someone no longer there. You begin to mark your years not in candles or moons, but in how many times you've been mistaken for her. And one day, in the privacy of your chamber, you run your fingers through your hair, still dyed with the ashes of sacred fire, and whisper your true name, just to hear it again. The sound is strange, thin, almost like it belongs to someone else now. As the city beyond the temple walls celebrates the festival of Inti Raymi, the streets are alive with flutes, drums, and the scent of roasted maize. You hear the joy and wonder if anyone out there remembers who you were before this, before you became someone else's memory. And yet you are not angry. Not exactly. There is something tranquil in this silence, something reverent, even if it is borrowed. You return to your chamber where gold shimmers across the walls like sunlight through water. You lie down on your woven mat, fold your hands over your chest in the way she used to, and breathe in deeply. The air is thin, but you were trained for that. And outside, the sun sets slowly behind the mountains, not knowing perhaps that one of its daughters is still awake, quietly remembering what no one else will. There is no empire now, no golden sun temple gleaming in the morning haze, no burning braziers in Rome or silent cloisters in the forbidden city, no grand palaces where veils are placed over mirrors to shield the emperor from his own reflection. The halls have gone quiet. The gods have left their statues. And yet, their shadows remain. And so do you. Not as a face carved into marble, not as a name etched on a stone wall, but as something quieter, the breath behind a ritual, the unspoken cost of someone else's grief. You may have thought this was just a tale about emperors and empires, about Nero and Sporus, and those chosen by power to live as echoes of the dead. But no, this is also a story about memory, about how grief doesn't always bury the past, but sometimes tries to recreate it, and how the people asked to carry that burden, the Sporus, the concubines, the sun daughters, the dancers, were more than just vessels. They were people, real people with thoughts and hearts and names that didn't always survive the telling. They were asked to disappear, and yet they never really did. Look closely and you'll see them. You'll see them in the fragments of a mirror buried in a collapsed Roman villa, in the silk sleeves of a forgotten performer's costume, tucked away in a Kyoto archive, in a golden headdress from Cusco, bent but not broken, hidden away for centuries, in a cave high in the Andes, in letters between Persian wives and court advisors, wondering aloud if the new concubine was a copy of the one who had passed, and whether love could ever live in such a reflection. Even today you see them. Not in temples or courts, but in photographs that look just a little too staged. In magazine covers that insist someone has the same look as a legend long gone. In songs that try to resurrect a voice that can no longer sing. The story always finds new forms. And what does that say about us? Perhaps it means we're still trying to keep people with us. That we fear ending so much we sometimes ask the living to hold the shape of what we lost. And maybe that's a kind of love. A difficult one. A dangerous one. But love still. Or perhaps it's a kind of forgetting dressed up as remembrance. A desire to avoid grief by rehearsing a version of joy we no longer have. It's complicated, but what's not complicated is this. The people behind the roles, the ones who were chosen, shaped, renamed, they mattered. Not because they played the part well, but because they existed at all. Because they endured. Sporus endured. Through shame, spectacle, and sorrow, his story survived. Not because Nero preserved it, but because others remembered what it cost him. The concubine in the forbidden city endured. Her real name may be lost, but her image remained on a fan, a flicker of silk, in the corner of a painted screen. The temple girl in Cusco endured. Not as a goddess, but as a person who once whispered her true name when no one was listening. And you listening to this, perhaps in the quiet of your room before sleep, takes you. You carry them now too, in your imagination, in the time you gave to this story, in the gentle pause that lingers once the last word is spoken, and maybe that's the softest kind of justice there is. So tonight, as you rest, remember this. You don't have to be a ruler to shape the future. Sometimes all it takes is remembering the forgotten, listening to the silence, and honoring the people history nearly erased. Because every time we tell their story, not as legends, but as lives, they live again. Thank you for walking with us through this quiet corner of history. If stories like this help you sleep, or help you feel just a little more connected to the long, strange tapestry of human memory, you're always welcome here. You can subscribe or not. You can leave a comment or simply hold the silence. But if you do feel like sharing what stayed with you tonight, what part of this story stirred something in you, I read them all. Now, close your eyes. The past will wait. And morning when it comes will find you a little softer than before. Sleep well.